My wife was cheating on me with her coworker. I caught them on camera. Now she's crying and begging for forgiveness. I've always thought of myself as a pretty average guy. My name's Jason, and I've been married to Ashley for 7 years now. We met in college, dated for a couple of years, and everything seemed perfect. We both had good jobs, bought a house in the suburbs, and our son, Nathan, is 3 now. On the outside, life was perfect. But lately, I started feeling off. Something wasn't right, but I couldn't put my finger on it. It all began a few months ago. Ashley's been acting strange, not in a huge way, but just enough for me to notice. She's been more distant, spending a lot of time on her phone, going out with her friends more often than she used to. I tried to brush it off, thinking maybe she was just stressed from work, but my gut was telling me something else. The real trigger came when I found something strange on her phone. Now, I'm not the kind of guy to snoop, but this just happened by accident. Nathan loves playing with Ashley's phone, and he accidentally opened her email one day while I was babysitting him. That's when I noticed an email notification from a name I didn't recognize. David Green. The subject line was innocent enough, lunch plans, but something felt off. I asked Ashley about it casually later that night. She barely flinched. "Oh, he's just a guy from work," she said, not even looking up from her phone. It was such a non-answer, but I didn't push. I wanted to believe her. Now, here's where things start getting weird. After that email from David, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. But I tried to convince myself that I was just being paranoid. I mean, Ashley and I had been together for years. She'd never given me a real reason to doubt her before. So, I pushed it out of my mind, or at least, I tried to. One night, things took a strange turn. It was a Friday, and Ashley told me she was going out with her friends for a girls' night. It wasn't unusual. She's done this a few times before, and I never questioned it. I had a quiet night at home with Nathan, put him to bed, and was just about to relax when my phone buzzed. It was an alert from the garage camera. See, I'm kind of a tech geek. I installed a bunch of smart devices in the house, including a security camera in the garage that sends notifications if there's movement. But I wasn't expecting any notifications tonight, especially since Ashley wasn't supposed to be home for hours. Curious, I opened the app and checked the footage. There it was, Ashley's car pulling into the driveway. But here's the thing. It was only 11:30 p.m. She'd told me she wouldn't be home until late, maybe 2 or 3 a.m., and she was usually good about sticking to that. The car sat idling for a minute, and then I saw her. She got out of the driver's seat, looking around like she was checking if anyone was watching. And then the passenger door opened, and a guy stepped out. I squinted at the screen, trying to make out who it was. It wasn't until he turned toward the camera that I recognized him. It was David Green. My heart dropped into my stomach. They didn't even go into the house. Instead, they stood there, talking quietly. Ashley glanced up at the house a few times, like she was nervous someone would see. Then, she did something I never thought I'd see her do. She leaned in and kissed him. I froze. It felt like the air was sucked out of the room. It wasn't just a friendly peck on the cheek either. It was a full-on kiss, the kind we used to share when we first started dating. That same passion, that same connection, and she was giving it to him. They stood there for what felt like forever, talking and laughing in hushed voices, before David finally got back in the car and drove off. Ashley walked into the house a few minutes later, acting like nothing had happened. I didn't confront her that night. I couldn't. I was too stunned, too angry. Instead, I sat there, replaying the footage over and over, hoping I was somehow misunderstanding what I saw. But the truth was right there on my phone screen, and there was no denying it anymore. Ashley was cheating on me. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about that kiss, replaying it in my head like some awful, stuck record. Part of me wanted to wake Ashley up and confront her right then and there, but I wasn't ready. I needed more answers, explanations, something. So, I did the only thing I could think of at 2 a.m. I started digging. I scrolled through her social media, looking for any clue I might have missed. Nothing too obvious, just the usual posts. Pictures with Nathan, some from our family vacations, and random quotes about self-care and living your truth that now made me feel sick to my stomach. Then I checked her phone records. Don't ask me how. I've always had access to our account, but I never used it like this. I scrolled through her call logs, and sure enough, there it was, David Green, over and over, sometimes in the middle of the day, sometimes late at night, always for longer than your average work call. That feeling in my gut I'd been ignoring for weeks, it wasn't paranoia. It was real. The next morning, I tried to act normal. Ashley got up like it was any other day, smiling at me from across the kitchen as she made coffee. "How was your night?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Good. We just went to that new wine bar downtown, the one Carrie's been talking about," she replied, stirring sugar into her cup like everything was fine. "Came home a bit early because I was tired." Lies. All of it. I nodded, pretending to buy her story. But inside, I was fuming. I couldn't believe how easily she could lie to my face. I watched her throughout the day, looking for any sign of guilt or regret. But she acted like nothing had happened, laughing with Nathan, chatting about weekend plans, even leaning in to give me a kiss on the cheek at one point, like she hadn't just kissed another man the night before. By the afternoon, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to know how deep this went, how long she'd been lying to me. So, I took things further. I started tracking her location through our shared Find My app, something I'd never done before because, well, I trusted her. But trust wasn't on the table anymore. A few days later, she told me she had another girls' night coming up. I said nothing, just nodded, pretending like everything was cool. When she left that night, I pulled up the app and watched as her little moved across town, not to a wine bar, but to a hotel on the other side of the city. My chest tightened. I didn't want to believe it, but there it was, clear as day. I didn't drive over there. I thought about it, but I knew if I showed up, I'd lose it. Instead, I sat in the living room with a beer, staring at that little dot on the map, imagining everything that was happening behind closed doors. And that's when I knew. This wasn't just some fling. Ashley wasn't just working late or going out with friends. She was seeing him, meeting him, sneaking around behind my back. And she didn't even care if I found out. That night, once Nathan was asleep, I couldn't hold it in any longer. I walked into the living room where Ashley was watching TV. My heart was racing, and I could feel the anger boiling inside me, but I had to stay calm. "Ashley," I said, my voice firmer than usual. She glanced over, raising an eyebrow. "What's up? We need to talk." I didn't sit down. My legs felt shaky, but I stood tall. She turned off the TV, looking at me with mild concern. "Okay, what's going on?" I took a deep breath. "I know about David." Her face froze. The color drained from her cheeks, but she quickly recovered, forcing a nervous laugh. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the hotel, Ashley. About you kissing him in our driveway," I said, the words sharp and cold. For a moment, she looked genuinely shocked, but then she crossed her arms defensive. "Jason, it's not what you think. We're just friends." "Friends," I repeated, almost laughing. "Friends don't sneak off to hotels together." She stood up, her voice rising. "You don't understand. I was lonely, okay? Things haven't been the same between us for a while. So you decided to lie to me? Sneak around with another man?" I asked, my voice trembling with anger. Her face softened slightly, tears welling up in her eyes. "I didn't want to hurt you. It just happened." I shook my head, the weight of everything crashing down on me. "How long?" 3 months, she whispered, barely able to meet my eyes. I stared at her, the woman I thought I knew, and all I could feel was betrayal. The silence stretched between us, thick with everything that had been left unsaid for months. I didn't know if I could ever look at her the same way again. The silence that filled the room after her confession was unbearable. 3 months. She'd been lying to me for 3 months, living a double life while pretending everything was fine at home. I stood there, trying to wrap my head around it, but nothing made sense anymore. Ashley wiped her eyes and finally broke the silence. "Jason, I never wanted this to happen." I felt a bitter laugh escape me. "You never wanted this to happen, but you made it happen. Every time you left for one of those so-called girls' nights, every time you kissed him, you made that choice." Her tears came harder now, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. I wanted to, though. Some twisted part of me still wanted to hold her, tell her it would be okay, but I knew it wasn't. Not this time. "I didn't do it because I don't love you," she said, her voice trembling. I was confused. Things between us fell off. I shook my head, feeling the frustration rising again. "Off? Why didn't you talk to me, Ashley? Why didn't you try to fix it? Instead, you went to him." She took a shaky breath, her eyes red and swollen. "I'm sorry, Jason. I messed up. I don't want to lose us." Her words hung in the air, but they felt hollow. I wasn't sure if I could believe her anymore. Could you even rebuild something that's been shattered like this? "I need time," I finally said, my voice quiet but firm. "I can't just pretend this didn't happen." She nodded, wiping her face. "I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. I'll stop seeing him, I swear." But in that moment, I wasn't sure if that was enough. Part of me was already gone, lost to the lies, the betrayal, and the disbelief. The marriage I thought we had was no longer real, and I didn't know how or if it could be saved. After that night, the house felt different. We didn't speak much the next few days, only talking about things that needed immediate attention, like Nathan or groceries. There was a thick tension between us, and the trust one once had was nowhere to be found. I could barely look at Ashley without feeling the weight of her betrayal. Every time she spoke, I could hear the desperation in her voice. She was trying, really trying, to make things seem normal again. She would cook dinner, ask about my day, and even attempt to sit close to me on the couch. But all I could do was pull away. One evening, after Nathan had gone to bed, she sat down next to me. Her eyes were tired, red from what I guess were more tears when I wasn't around. "We need to figure this out, Jason," she said quietly. I sighed, rubbing my temples. "Figure what out, Ashley? You cheated. You lied. I don't know if there's anything left to figure out." Her lip trembled. "I'll do whatever you need. Therapy, counseling. I'll quit my job if that's what it takes." I looked at her, and for a brief moment, I saw the woman I had married, the one I thought I could trust with my whole life. But then the memories of her kissing David, sneaking around with him for months, crashed back down on me. The hurt was too deep. "Counseling won't erase what you did," I said, my voice tight. "How am I supposed to trust you again?" "I'll earn it back," she pleaded. "I'll prove to you that I'm sorry, that I want to fix this." Her words hung in the air, and I could tell she meant them. But I wasn't sure if I could let her try. The thought of staying, of going through therapy and pretending like everything could go back to normal, felt impossible. "I need space," I finally said, my voice heavy. I don't know if I can fix this with you right now." Ashley's face crumpled, and she started to cry again, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. I stood up and walked out of the room, leaving her there with her tears. It wasn't about punishing her. It was about saving myself from drowning in this mess. After that conversation, I knew things couldn't stay the same. The tension between us was suffocating, and every time I looked at Ashley, all I could see was her betrayal. I couldn't keep pretending that everything might go back to how it was before. The next morning, I told her I needed to leave for a while. I didn't make a big announcement or anything. I just packed a bag and told her I'd be staying at a friend's place for a few days. I needed space, real space, to think. Ashley didn't say much. She just nodded, tears welling up in her eyes again, but for once, she didn't try to stop me. Maybe she knew this was the only way forward. Or maybe she was just too tired of fighting. "I'll explain to Nathan," she whispered as I was about to walk out the door. "I'll tell him you're going away for work." Her voice cracked on the last word, and for a second, I almost reconsidered. I didn't want to leave Nathan in the middle of all this. Didn't want him to feel the weight of what was happening. But I couldn't stay. Not right now. "I'll come back to see him," I said quietly. "I just need some time." Ashley nodded again, biting her lip to keep from crying, and I walked out the door. As soon as I stepped outside, the cold air hit me, and I felt like I could finally breathe again. But at the same time, there was an ache in my chest, knowing that this wasn't just some temporary break. Things were different now, and I wasn't sure if time away would fix anything. I spent the next few nights on my friend Mike's couch. He didn't ask a lot of questions, just handed me a beer and let me talk when I was ready. I told him about the affair, about how everything had come crashing down in just a few weeks. He listened, nodding here and there, but mostly he just let me vent. "Do you think you'll go back?" he finally asked one night after I had finished talking. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me feels like I should try. For Nathan. But I don't know if I can forgive her." Mike didn't push for an answer. He just clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Take your time, man. Don't rush into anything." So that's what I did. I stayed away, visiting Nathan during the day, but avoiding Ashley as much as possible. She gave me space, didn't call or text much, but I could see the sadness in her eyes whenever I picked up Nathan. She was trying to hold it together, for him, for us. But I still wasn't sure if it would be enough. As the days passed, I felt a mix of relief and guilt. Relief that I didn't have to deal with the tension at home, but guilt that I was leaving Ashley to handle the aftermath of her own mistakes. She had broken us, but now I was the one walking away. And the question that kept haunting me was simple. Was there anything left to save? After a week at Mike's, I felt like I had to face things again. Avoiding Ashley wasn't solving anything. It was just delaying the inevitable. I didn't know if I was ready to forgive her, or if I ever would be, but I couldn't keep hiding from the situation. I had to go back, at least for Nathan's sake. When I walked into the house, the air felt heavy. Ashley was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at her coffee. She looked up when she heard the door open, and for a second, I saw hope flash across her face. But I didn't smile. I couldn't. "Hey," she said softly, as if she was afraid to speak too loud, like she might scare me away. "Hey," I replied, setting my bag down by the door. There was a long, awkward pause. I could feel her wanting to say something, but she didn't. She just sat there, waiting for me to speak. "I'm here for Nathan," I finally said, breaking the silence. "We need to talk about what's next." She nodded, her eyes filling with tears again. "Jason, I know I've hurt you. I know I've ruined everything. But I'm still here. I still want to make this work." I couldn't help but feel a flicker of anger. Make this work? It sounded so simple when she said it, but nothing about this was simple anymore. "I don't know if I can just move on, Ashley," I said, my voice steady but cold. "You didn't just break my trust, you shattered it." She looked down, biting her lip. "I know. I'll do anything, Jason. Therapy, counseling, whatever it takes. I'll cut off all contact with David. I already have." I clenched my jaw. Hearing his name still made my stomach turn. "It's not just about David. It's about the lies. It's about you choosing him over me for months." She didn't say anything. She just wiped at her eyes, nodding slowly. "Look, I'm not saying I'm ready to give up completely," I continued, "but I'm not ready to just go back to how things were either. I need time." Ashley looked up, hope flickering in her eyes again. "Time is fine. I'll wait as long as you need." I took a deep breath. "For now, I'm staying in the guest room. I'll be here for Nathan, and we'll figure out the rest. But we're not a couple right now. I need space to figure out what I want." She nodded again, looking heartbroken but relieved. "I understand." And just like that, we settled into a new kind of existence. We lived in the same house, but as strangers. I saw Nathan every day, but with Ashley, things were distant cold. We were two people trying to pretend life was normal for our son's sake, but inside, I was still struggling with whether or not we even had a future. The days after my return settled into an uncomfortable routine. We lived in the same house, but it felt like a shell of what it used to be. Conversations were limited to things about Nathan or household chores. Ashley did her best to stay out of my way, but there was a constant tension between us, lingering like a storm waiting to break. She tried, though. I could see it. She'd make dinner, the meals she knew I liked, or ask if I needed anything before heading to bed. But every kind gesture just reminded me of how far we'd fallen. Every time she tried to reach out, I felt myself pulling back even further. One evening, after Nathan was asleep, she came to the door of the guest room. She knocked softly, almost as if she was afraid to disturb me. "Jason, can we talk?" she asked, standing in the doorway. I hesitated but eventually nodded, letting her in. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands fidgeting in her lap. I could tell she'd been crying again. Her eyes were red and her voice wavered. "I don't know what to say anymore," she began, her voice quiet. "I'm so sorry. I know I've hurt you more than I can ever fix, but I don't want to give up on us. I'll do anything to make this right." I stared at her, not sure how to respond. "Ashley, I don't even know what right looks like anymore. You broke us. How am I supposed to believe anything will be the same?" Tears spilled down her cheeks as she nodded, accepting my words. "I know. I don't expect things to just go back to the way they were. I want a chance to show you that I'm still here, that I want to make it right." Her desperation was clear, but the hurt inside me hadn't healed. "It's not just about the affair," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "It's the lies, the months of sneaking around. I can't get that out of my head." She wiped her face, her voice shaking. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'll spend the rest of my life trying to earn it if I have to." The room felt heavy with the weight of everything that had gone unsaid for so long. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But trusting her again seemed impossible. "I need time," I finally said, my voice soft but firm. "I'm not saying I'll never forgive you, but I can't promise anything right now." Ashley nodded, her tears still falling. "I'll wait. I'll give you whatever time you need." She stood up to leave, pausing at the door. "I love you, Jason. I know I don't deserve to say that, but I do. I always will." I didn't respond. I just watched her leave the room, her words hanging in the air. As the door closed softly behind her, I felt the familiar ache in my chest. She was trying, but the question that haunted me was whether trying would ever be enough. Days turned into weeks, and the atmosphere in the house remained thick with uncertainty. Ashley was trying. I could see that. She made every effort to stay out of my way, giving me the space I asked for, yet still doing everything she could to show she hadn't given up. But that was the problem. I wasn't sure if I was ready to meet her halfway. Even though she was giving me everything I asked for, part of me wondered if it would ever be enough to fix what she broke. The idea of going back to how things were felt impossible, like trying to repair something that had already been shattered beyond recognition. One evening, Nathan was sitting at the dinner table, playing with his food, while Ashley and I sat in silence. He looked up suddenly and asked, "Daddy, when are you going to come back to Mommy's room?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I glanced at Ashley, who immediately looked down, clearly hoping I wouldn't say something that would upset Nathan. I forced a smile for Nathan's sake. "I'm still here, buddy. I'm not going anywhere." He seemed satisfied with that, but the weight of the question lingered long after dinner. That night, I sat in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, wondering what the right decision was. Was I staying just for Nathan's sake? Was it possible to move forward? Or was I clinging to something that no longer existed? The truth was, I didn't have an answer. I'd been hoping that time apart would make things clearer, but if anything, I felt more conflicted than ever. One part of me wanted to try, to give Ashley the chance she begged for. The other part wanted to cut ties and move on, afraid that even if we tried to repair things, the cracks would always be there, reminding me of what she did. Ashley knocked on the door again that night, stepping in quietly. "I put Nathan to bed," she said softly. "I know this is hard for him, for all of us." I nodded, not looking at her. She stepped closer, her voice fragile. "Jason, I can't force you to forgive me. I don't even know if you ever will. But I'm still here, and I'll keep being here as long as you let me." Her words stirred something inside me. Pain, frustration, maybe even a glimmer of hope. But I wasn't ready to decide. Not yet. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Ashley," I said, my voice steady but heavy with emotion. "But I know that Nathan deserves the best from both of us, no matter what happens." She nodded, tears in her eyes again, but she didn't say anything else. She just stood there for a moment before quietly walking out of the room. That night, I lay awake, knowing that a decision would have to come soon. I just wasn't sure if I was strong enough to make it yet. The days stretched on, and the weight of uncertainty pressed harder. Living in the same house without any clear direction was draining us both. I could see it in Ashley's face. She was waiting, hoping for a decision, something to give her a clue about where things stood. And honestly, I was waiting too, but the answer wasn't coming any easier. One evening, after another quiet dinner, she spoke up, her voice soft but urgent. "Jason, I can't do this anymore, not like this. I know I've hurt you, and I don't expect everything to go back to normal. But I need to know, is there any hope for us?" Her words hung heavy between us, and I could feel my chest tighten. This was it. The question I had been avoiding, and now was staring me in the face. I didn't know how to answer. Part of me wanted to tell her no, that it was over, that the damage was too deep. But another part of me wasn't ready to close the door completely. "I don't know," I said quietly. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you." She nodded, blinking back tears, but didn't break eye contact. "I don't expect you to forgive me right now. I just want to know if you're willing to try, if there's even a chance." I looked at her, my emotions pulling me in two different directions. I could see how much she wanted to fix things, how sorry she was, but I wasn't sure if that was enough. The trust we had was shattered, and it felt like every time I looked at her, I was reminded of what she'd done. "I don't know if trying is enough," I finally said, my voice strained. "The trust, it's gone, and I don't know if we can get it back." Her tears started falling then, but she didn't look away. "I know, but I'm here, Jason. I'm willing to do whatever it takes, for however long it takes, to rebuild that trust. I don't want to lose us." Her desperation hit me hard, and I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to give her a chance, but the hurt was still so fresh. How do you rebuild something when the foundation is cracked beyond repair? "I'm not saying it's impossible," I said, struggling with the words. "But I'm not ready to say it's possible either. I need time." She nodded slowly, wiping her face. "Take all the time you need," she whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." She left the room quietly, and I sat there alone, feeling the weight of the decision growing heavier with each passing day. I wasn't sure how much time would be enough, or if any amount of time would ever make this feel right again. The days continued to pass, and while nothing felt fully resolved, a strange rhythm began to settle into our lives. Nathan was the glue holding things together, unknowingly keeping both of us focused on something other than the mess between us. We still acted like a family for his sake, making sure he didn't feel the cracks that had formed beneath the surface. One Saturday, we took him to the park. It was something we used to do all the time, but since everything had happened, it had been a while. As we sat on a bench watching Nathan run around, laughing with other kids, there was a moment, a flicker of normalcy. For a split second, I felt like things were okay. We sat there side by side, not talking much, but it didn't feel as heavy as before. Ashley noticed it too. She glanced over at me, her eyes searching mine for something, maybe a sign that there was still hope. "It feels nice, doesn't it?" she asked quietly. I nodded, not fully trusting myself to speak. It did feel nice, but that flicker of normalcy was fleeting. The weight of everything that had happened still loomed, even in this brief moment of peace. As the sun began to set, Nathan ran up to us, his face flushed from playing. Can we come back tomorrow? He asked excitedly, looking between us with bright eyes. Ashley smiled softly and looked at me. We can if Daddy's free. I hesitated. It seemed so simple, just a trip to the park. But behind that question was a deeper one. Can we ever really go back to how things were? Could we keep pretending, even for Nathan, without everything crashing down eventually? Yeah, I said after a pause. We can come back tomorrow. The smile that spread across Nathan's face made my heart ache. He didn't know the storm we were in, but for him, we were still just Mom and Dad. And maybe, just maybe, I could hold on to that for a little longer. As we packed up and walked back to the car, Ashley didn't push for anything more. She was trying to respect the space I needed, and I could see how hard it was for her. The silent question hung between us, though. Could this be the first step towards something better? I didn't have the answer yet, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe there was a path forward, even if it was still unclear. The next day, as promised, we took Nathan back to the park. It felt like a small step, a momentary return to normalcy. But beneath the surface, nothing was really normal. We were going through the motions, pretending for Nathan's sake, but the tension between Ashley and me never really disappeared. We continued this routine for the next few weeks. Family outings, quiet dinners, all for the sake of keeping things stable for our son. But each time we came home, it was back to the reality we both were avoiding. I still slept in the guest room, and though Ashley respected my space, I could feel her waiting, hoping for more. One evening, after Nathan had gone to bed, Ashley knocked on the door to the guest room. It had become a pattern. She would knock. I would let her in, and she would say something small, maybe hopeful, but never push too hard. This time, though, something felt different. Jason, she started, her voice soft. I know we've been trying to act normal for Nathan, and I'm grateful for that. But I don't want us to just be pretending anymore. I stayed silent, not sure where she was going with this. I want us to really try, she continued. Not just for him, but for us. I know it's going to take time, and I know I hurt you, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes. She stood there, waiting for me to respond, but I didn't know what to say. I could feel the sincerity in her words, the desperation. But I also knew that trying meant opening myself up to being hurt again, and that scared me more than anything. Ashley, I said finally, I'm not saying we can't try, but I'm not ready to just jump back into things. The trust is still gone. I'm still not sure how or if we can rebuild it. Her eyes welled with tears, but she nodded, accepting what I said. I understand. I'll keep giving you space. But I just need you to know, I'm not giving up on us. I nodded, appreciating her honesty, but feeling the weight of her words at the same time. I wanted to believe we could move forward, but the fear of being hurt again loomed large in my mind. After she left, I lay there in the quiet, staring at the ceiling. Trying would mean slowly letting her back in, opening the door to the possibility of forgiveness. But I wasn't sure if I could ever let my guard down again. And the hardest part, I wasn't sure if I wanted to. As the weeks went by, things between Ashley and me remained complicated. We kept up appearances for Nathan, but underneath, I was still wrestling with everything. Ashley hadn't pushed me after our last talk, and I could tell she was trying to give me the space I needed. But the silence between us had become almost unbearable. One evening, after Nathan went to bed, I found myself sitting in the kitchen, staring into a cup of coffee. I was lost in thought, the same question running through my head. Could I really forgive her? The fear of trying again, of letting her back into my life, kept me paralyzed. I wanted to believe that people could change, that she could change, but what if I was wrong? What if I let her in, and she broke me again? Ashley walked into the kitchen quietly, breaking my train of thought. She stopped when she saw me sitting there, hesitating before speaking. "Jason," she started softly, "I know you're still unsure, and I get it, but do you think you could ever trust me again? Even just a little?" Her question hung in the air, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I needed to answer her, to really say something instead of staying in this limbo. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice sounding tired even to my own ears. "Part of me wants to believe you, to trust that you've changed. But part of me is scared, Ashley, scared that if I try, I'll just get hurt all over again." She nodded, stepping a little closer but keeping her distance. "I get that. I don't want to hurt you again. I wish I could go back and undo everything. But all I can do now is show you that I'm still here, and I'm committed to making this right." Her words were earnest, and for a moment, I let myself imagine that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. But the doubt, the fear, always crept back in. "I'm not saying no," I finally said, the weight of my words clear. "But it's going to take time. I'm still figuring out if I can do this." Ashley's eyes filled with tears, but this time there was a glimmer of hope in them. "That's all I asked for, Jason. Time." As she walked away, I felt a strange mixture of relief and anxiety. I wasn't ready to forgive her yet, but for the first time, I realized that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't ready to let go either. In the weeks that followed, things started to shift, though slowly. The tension between Ashley and me wasn't gone, but there was something different. A sense that maybe we were finally moving forward, even if just by an inch at a time. We weren't back to being the couple we once were, and I wasn't sure we ever would be. But for the first time since everything had come crashing down, we were actually talking. Real conversations, not just about Nathan or dinner plans. We talked about the betrayal, the hurt, and how we ended up where we were. I told her how much she'd broken my trust, and she didn't argue, didn't try to defend herself. She just listened. One night, as we sat on the porch after putting Nathan to bed, she looked at me, her voice soft. "Do you think we'll ever be okay again?" I didn't answer right away. The truth was, I didn't know. But something inside me had shifted. The anger wasn't as sharp, and the hurt, while still there, didn't feel as overwhelming as it once had. "I think it's possible," I said finally, looking out into the yard. "But we can't go back to how things were. That's gone. If we're going to try, it has to be something new." She nodded, and for the first time in months, I saw something that almost looked like hope in her eyes. "I'm okay with that," she said quietly. "I just want us to be something again." We sat in silence for a while after that, just the sound of the night filling the space between us. It wasn't a perfect moment, far from it, but it was the first time in a long time that things felt possible. The following weekend, we took Nathan to the park again. This time, it felt a little less forced, a little less like we were just going through the motions. When Nathan ran ahead to the swings, Ashley turned to me, her face soft, hopeful. "I'm not going to rush you," she said, "but thank you for not giving up. On us, I mean." I looked at her, feeling the weight of her words. I wasn't sure what the future held for us, or if we would ever fully heal. But for the first time, I realized that maybe I didn't have to make a final decision right away. Maybe healing wasn't a straight line. Maybe it was about trying, one day at a time, and seeing where that took us. "I'm not ready to give up either," I admitted, feeling the truth of my own words. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was something. As we watched Nathan play, I realized that maybe, just maybe, there was a path forward for us. Not the one we had planned, but something new. Something fragile but real. And for now, that was enough.